Jennifer Bassett from Thriving Grade 5. In this video, I am going to help you learn how to make the Bill of Rights applicable to your students' lives. So when should you teach the Bill of Rights? For me, I only teach the Bill of Rights after I have thoroughly taught the Constitution. So we talk about the preamble, we talk about the branches of government, and then we go into the Bill of Rights. I do have a blog post that I will link for you in the video description that will tell you how I teach the Constitution. So, do we really need the Bill of Rights? I ask my students this every year, and a lot of times they'll say, no, we don't really need the Bill of Rights. It's not that important. So then I start listing rights and things that they enjoy on the whiteboard. I say, okay, sporting events. Do we enjoy sporting events? Well, yes, we do. And then I cross it out. If we don't have the Bill of Rights, there's no freedom to assemble. So sporting events are gone. Do we like speaking freely? Do we like sharing our opinion? Yes, of course we do. Well, if we don't have the Bill of Rights, you can't do that anymore. That gets crossed out. There's no freedom of speech. I go through several different things, privacy, fair punishments, freedom of religion, and we talk about how if we don't have a Bill of Rights in place, then those rights and privileges are gone. The Bill of Rights was absolutely critical to the Constitution because some states refused to ratify or approve the Constitution until those individual freedoms were protected with a Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights is what pushed the Constitution into ratification. When I introduced the Bill of Rights, we framed them saying that the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments or changes to the Constitution. We talk about each amendment one at a time, and I simplify the wording. With my students, I use interactive notebooks, so we will just make a full page spread about the Bill of Rights. We will break down each amendment into the simplest meaning that I can make for them. Because with fifth graders, they need just the basic meaning of each amendment because they get really confused with those 18th century words and terms. So I make sure to break down the Bill of Rights very simply for my students. The First Amendment is always the one that we spend the most time on because the First Amendment contains so much. You've got the freedom of religion, speech, petition, the press, assembly. The First Amendment is huge. The Third Amendment is a really interesting one for my students because they remember the Quartering Act way back when we talked about the Road to Revolution. And they know how much colonists hated the Quartering Act. So it makes complete sense that our founding fathers included Amendment 3 in the Constitution and, frankly, the Bill of Rights. This is a page that you can get on my blog, or if you can't find it, just email me and I will send it to you. This is the Bill of Rights in modern language. So I just took the Bill of Rights and I took those 18th century terms and I modernized them so that students could understand the Bill of Rights using modern language. When our students have content that is applicable to their lives, they understand so much more. And this is definitely true when teaching something as complex as the Bill of Rights. You can absolutely make the Bill of Rights applicable to your students by using current events, real life scenarios, and some critical thinking activities. So when I use real life scenarios, I love using them because they can be controlled. They're not going to take a wild turn like some news stories might take. Our real life scenarios can bring discussion and debate into the classroom, and they also help students to think critically, which helps them to understand the Bill of Rights in a deeper, more meaningful way. This is one example of a real life scenario that I use. I'll just read it to you. Molly Smith is a 17-year-old high school student. She uses her cell phone frequently, like most students her age. On the way to school last week, she was pulled over by a police officer, and the police officer said that she had violated her state's no texting while driving law. The officer gave Molly a $225 ticket. Molly told the officer that she was not texting and driving, so this ticket was unfair. The officer picked up Molly's phone from the dashboard and scrolled through it and tried to find a text message that was time-stamped for the precise time that he pulled her over. So, very interesting scenario. I ask my students to look through their Bill of Rights in modern language and try to find the amendment that this scenario relates to. Are Molly's rights being violated? Did the officer have the right to grab her cell phone and start looking through it without her permission? What amendment does this relate to? Current events are a fantastic way to teach the Bill of Rights. We live in this information-rich world. You can't be on social media for 5 minutes without seeing some sort of current event or news story. So what I do when I am going to introduce some current events relating to the Bill of Rights, that morning or the day before, I will go to my local news website and I'll find a couple of stories that somehow touch the Bill of Rights. I'll project them up on my smartboard and we will read through the news story, and then we'll talk about how this news story relates to the Bill of Rights. Definitely be careful. Always read the entire story and preview it before you show it to your class and have them discuss it. Definitely don't want to hit any sensitive or traumatic topics. Once my students have read the story and we've talked about how it relates to the Bill of Rights, I like to have them write a quick summary of the story and the amendment that the story relates to. Here is a current event scenario that I found. Students at a middle school in a small American town were told that they are not allowed to use social media while they are students at the school. That doesn't just include during school hours. It's weekends, evenings, summer break, holidays. The principal said you are not allowed to use social media at all, even if you're at home in your free time. Are the students' rights being violated? How does this relate to the Bill of Rights? Well, my students and I will come up with some ways that this relates to the Bill of Rights. It definitely violates freedom of speech. Does it violate your right to privacy? Should the school be able to regulate what you do at home and give you consequences at school? These are very interesting discussions for our students to have, and they all relate to the Bill of Rights. I do have lots more scenarios. I have printable task cards with Bill of Rights scenarios, and in all of my Constitution resource, I have scenarios woven in so that students can think about how real life connects to the Bill of Rights. Critical thinking, definitely very important. This is an activity that I do with my students every year, and it's one of those fun, super critical thinking activities that they will remember for the rest of the year. So how I set it up is I say that aliens have come to the United States and they admire all the rights that we have. But in their country, on their planet, they can only have 5 rights included in their Bill of Rights. So students have to put the rights in order of importance. And at first, your students will say, oh yeah, no big deal. We can put rights in order of importance. But then they start talking about their rights and which ones to put at the bottom of the list versus which ones go at the top of the list. And they discover that it is really, really hard. It's painful to think about giving up some of our rights. Usually with my students, they will say that freedom of assembly is at the bottom of the list. And so when we come back together as a class, I always point out that freedom of assembly gives us the right to go to movie theaters and gather in large groups at an amusement park or a concert or a sporting event. If we don't have freedom of assembly, we can't get together in large groups. And they usually, when they go back to revise their lists, I find that freedom of assembly ends up at the top of the list because gathering in groups is super important to kids. After students look at the rights they would lose, they realize how painful it is to think about losing or giving up any of our rights. And that's exactly where I want students to get. I want them to realize how each of our rights is precious and important, and we certainly don't want to give up any of them. This is a really fun, this is a free resource that I have, and I'll put the link in the video description. These are Constitution practice pages, and 2 of the pages are on the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights Cafe, they have to look at each amendment and decide which food item goes with each amendment, like fair punishments panini. Well, fair punishments, I know that that is the 8th Amendment. The 8th Amendment outlaws cruel and unusual punishment, so I would price that as 8th Amendment. And so on. Really fun. My students love the Bill of Rights Cafe. Bill of Rights color code. For both of these, I would give them the Bill of Rights in modern language page. That'll help them to determine which rights go with which amendments. If you're looking for more advice on teaching social studies, there is a course for that. I will link it in the video description. It's a full self-paced course where you can learn about the best ways to teach social studies in upper elementary. I hope you have enjoyed this video and learned at least a couple of ways to make the Bill of Rights applicable to your students. Talk to you soon.